She was still a child herself when the world fell apart. The morning her parents did not come home. The house felt quieter than it ever had before. The air itself seemed to wait, holding its breath. She sat on the floor with her little brother beside her, his small fingers wrapped tightly around her sleeve. Outside, people whispered. Doors opened and closed. Someone cried in the distance. No one explained anything clearly, but she understood enough. Their parents were gone, and they were not coming back. She was just old enough to understand what death meant, just young enough to feel completely unprepared for it. Her brother was too small to grasp the truth. He kept asking when their mother would return, when their father would bring sweets like he always did. She answered him with soft lies at first, hoping time would delay the pain. But time only made it heavier. The days that followed blurred together. Neighbors brought food for a while. Relatives came, looked around, talked in low voices, and left. Some shook their heads with pity. Others avoided eye contact. No one offered to take them in. It became clear that the two children were on their own. On the night of the funeral, she lay awake listening to her brother breathe. The sound was uneven, broken by small sobs, even in his sleep. She stared at the cracked ceiling and felt something settle deep inside her chest. It was fear, but also a strange kind of resolve. She did not know how, but she knew one thing for sure. No matter what happened, she would not let him suffer alone. The next weeks were filled with confusion. Bills arrived that she could not read properly. The landlord came, asking about rent. School stopped being a place of learning and became a burden she could no longer carry. Every day brought a new problem. Every problem reminded her how alone they were. She made the hardest decision of her young life quietly. One morning, she did not go to school. Instead, she walked through the market, asking shop owners if they needed help. Most ignored her. Some laughed. A few offered small tasks for even smaller pay. She accepted everything. She cleaned floors, carried boxes, washed dishes, and stood for hours until her legs shook. At the end of the day, her hands smelled of soap and dust, and her body ached in places she did not know could hurt. But when she returned home with a little food, her brother's eyes lit up. That look alone made the pain worth it. They learned quickly how to stretch a single meal into two. Bread became thinner each day. Water replaced milk. She learned to cook simple food that filled the stomach even when it lacked taste. She ate less without saying a word, always pushing the better portion toward her brother. At night, when he complained of hunger, she told him stories. She made up tales about brave children who survived storms and monsters together. In every story, the brother was strong and the sister was brave. He would fall asleep smiling, believing the stories were just games. She stayed awake, knowing they were promises. The house grew colder as seasons changed. A broken window let in wind, and she covered it with cardboard. Rain leaked through the roof, and she placed bowls under the drops. Each sound of dripping water felt like a countdown to something worse. Still, she never cried in front of her brother. Sometimes when he was asleep, she allowed herself a few quiet tears. She missed being a child. She missed school, laughter, and the safety of knowing someone older would fix things. But those thoughts felt selfish. She wiped her face, stood up, and went back to work. People in the neighborhood noticed her, but not always kindly. Some whispered about the orphan girl who thought she was grown. Others looked at her with suspicion, as if poverty itself was a crime. She learned to keep her eyes down and her voice calm. Her brother started school, and that brought new worries. Uniforms cost money. Books were not free. When the teacher asked for fees, she smiled politely and promised to bring them soon. Inside, her heart raced. She worked longer hours, sometimes skipping sleep to earn a little more. One evening, her brother came home quiet. He sat on the floor and picked at his shoes. After much silence, he admitted that other children laughed at him. They said he smelled poor. They said his sister wore old clothes. The words cut deeper than hunger ever had. She pulled him into her arms and held him tightly. She told him that people often laugh at what they do not understand. She said being poor was not a shame, but giving up was. He nodded, trusting her completely. That trust scared her more than anything else. As months passed, her body grew thinner, but her mind grew sharper. She learned how to negotiate pay, how to spot unfair deals, how to stretch time and money. She learned when to speak and when silence was safer. Childhood slipped away quietly, replaced by responsibility. One winter night, her brother developed a fever. His small body burned, and his breathing sounded wrong. Panic filled her chest. She wrapped him in blankets and ran to a clinic, only to be turned away because she could not pay up front. She begged, her voice shaking, but rules were rules. She spent the night sitting beside him, cooling his forehead with damp cloths and whispering prayers she barely believed in anymore. By morning, the fever broke. Relief washed over her so strongly that she nearly collapsed. She realized then how close they were to losing everything. That day, she made another silent promise. She would find a way out of this life. Not just survival, but something better. Her brother deserved more than borrowed hope and empty stories. She did not know how destiny worked, or that someone far beyond her world would one day notice her quiet strength. For now, all she knew was the weight of responsibility on her young shoulders and the small hand that trusted her completely. As she stepped out into the cold morning to look for work again, she had no idea that this chapter of pain was only the beginning. But she walked forward anyway, carrying love, fear, and determination in equal measure, unaware that her life story had already started turning toward a future no one could imagine. The days after the winter fever were filled with a mixture of hope and relentless struggle. She woke up before the sun, careful not to wake her brother, who still slept with a slight trace of the fever lingering. The small room they rented smelled faintly of damp wood and dust, and she wrapped her arms around herself to chase away the cold. It was another day in a life where the line between survival and despair was thin and fragile. She ventured into the streets, walking past market stalls that seemed so full of life but were just out of reach for people like her. She offered to carry baskets, sweep floors, or wash dishes. Every job was small, every payment barely enough to buy bread. But she knew that even a few coins could mean warmth for her brother or a little milk to strengthen his weak body. She counted each penny with careful precision, knowing that one careless mistake could leave them hungry. At school, her brother struggled quietly. Teachers were kind but limited by their time and rules. Other children noticed his worn shoes and faded uniform. Whispers and stares followed him down the hallways. When he came home, he tried to hide the tears, but she could see them shining in his eyes. She comforted him as best as she could, speaking words meant to lift him. Though she herself was sinking under the weight of endless worry, she began to explore the city more, learning its hidden corners where work could be found and kindness sometimes offered. A small bakery let her sweep in exchange for leftover bread. A tailor allowed her to mend torn clothes for a few coins. She learned that persistence mattered more than talent, that patience often brought more reward than skill. Each small job she took was a brick in the fragile foundation of their survival. Evenings were the hardest. Her brother wanted stories, warmth, laughter, things she struggled to provide because her own body ached and her mind felt heavy. Yet she told tales with vibrant imagination, turning their small room into a world of hope and adventure. The stories kept him dreaming, kept him believing in a life beyond hunger and cold. And in those moments, she too found a flicker of joy, a reminder that love could survive even in the harshest conditions. One day, a new neighbor arrived. She watched quietly as a man with kind eyes and an air of quiet authority moved into the apartment next door. He seemed different from the others. She knew someone who noticed details, who spoke with patience, who smiled without expectation. She did not understand why, but a small hope stirred inside her. Perhaps not all adults were harsh or indifferent. Perhaps, somewhere, there were people who could see more than just the worn clothes and tired faces. As weeks passed, her small successes built a fragile network of support. She managed to save a little each month, hiding coins in a tin beneath the floorboards. She even began to dream, a little impossible dreams about their future. Perhaps they could move to a better place. Perhaps her brother could go to school without fear. Perhaps one day they could live without constant anxiety. The dreams were dangerous because they reminded her how much she longed for stability. But they also gave her strength to endure each day. Her brother began to notice the subtle changes too. She smiled more, even when tired. She laughed sometimes, a short sound but genuine. He asked her one evening why she worked so hard and gave so much, and she replied simply, "Because you are my family. Because I love you more than anything." He hugged her tightly and said nothing more, understanding perfectly what she meant. In that embrace, the hardships of the world felt a little lighter, the cold a little warmer. But life had more tests ahead. One afternoon, she fell ill herself. She had been skipping meals, working long hours, and the small comfort of warmth and rest had eluded her. Her body ached, her head throbbed, and every movement felt like climbing a mountain. She could not afford to stop, yet her body demanded rest. Her brother noticed her weakness and insisted she sit while he tried to help, but she waved him off, fearing what might happen if she left him alone. So she suffered quietly, hiding pain behind forced smiles and whispered assurances. The illness slowed her, but it did not break her. In those difficult days, she discovered the strength of community. A kind shopkeeper noticed her struggles and brought warm food. Another neighbor offered blankets and medicines she could not afford. She realized that even in a world that often seemed cruel, there were threads of kindness if one looked carefully enough. And she began to trust, cautiously, that the future might not be entirely dark. One evening, as she returned home with meager purchases from the market, she noticed the neighbor, the man who had recently moved in, standing at his doorway. He greeted her warmly, and for reasons she could not explain. She found herself speaking freely, telling him small fragments of her life. He listened without judgment, nodding with understanding. For the first time, she felt the weight of loneliness lift just slightly. Someone saw her struggle and did not turn away. Winter turned into spring, and life slowly grew more bearable. Her brother began to thrive in small ways, laning, smiling. Each tiny success became a victory, each hardship a lesson in resilience. She watched him grow and realized how much she had also grown. No longer just a child, she had become a protector, a teacher, a mother figure. Her body was weary, her hands calloused, but her heart was strong. The small victories were bittersweet. She knew their life could still crumble in an instant. Bills remained unpaid, rent hung over their heads, and sickness could strike at any moment. Yet, she moved forward with unwavering determination. Every morning, she made the choice to keep walking, to keep working, to keep dreaming. One evening, she found herself standing at the edge of the city park, watching her brother play with children whose lives seemed easier, brighter. She felt a pang of longing and sadness, wishing she could give him more than what she had, and yet a quiet pride filled her heart. He laughed. Despite hardship, he dreamed despite hunger, and he trusted her without question. That trust became her anchor, her reason to fight. In the midst of these struggles, small opportunities began to appear. The neighbor with kind eyes began offering small tasks, noticing her work ethic, her dedication, her quiet courage. He did not offer money, but guidance, small connections that could someday become more. She began to understand that perhaps the world could hold unexpected kindness, that sometimes help came from the most unforeseen places. At night, she lay beside her brother, listening to him breathe steadily, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond survival. Perhaps one day they would live without fear of hunger. Perhaps one day he would attend school with pride, not shame. Perhaps one day they could belong somewhere, not just exist. The thought was fragile, delicate, and thrilling. And in that fragile hope, she found a new kind of strength and determination to keep moving forward. No matter how heavy the world seemed, unseen by her, destiny was already turning in her favor. The seeds of change were being planted. Small interactions and quiet observations that would one day grow into something extraordinary. She had no idea that her relentless courage and unwavering love for her brother had drawn the attention of someone who could rewrite their lives entirely. For now, she only knew the cold streets, the hard work, the small joys, and the unbreakable bond with her brother that fueled every step she took into the uncertain future. spring turned into summer, and the city became hotter, noisier, and more demanding. She woke before the sun every morning, careful not to wake her brother, who would sleep longer during the early days of summer. Their small home felt hotter, and the tiny fan they had barely moved the air. Sweat stung her eyes as she prepared the small breakfast she could afford, usually bread and a little butter. She ate only a little, making sure her brother had the best portion. Finding work in the summer heat was even more difficult. Shops demanded labor, but the city moved too fast, and many employers ignored her. She spent hours walking from one place to another, asking for any job that might offer food or coins. Every rejection was a small pain, but she pushed forward, refusing to show discouragement. Her brother watched quietly, sometimes asking questions she could barely answer. She hugged him and said everything would be fine. Even when she didn't feel it herself, her days were filled with exhausting labor. She carried heavy loads, scrubbed floors until her hands bled, and ran errands for small pay. But she learned the importance of patience and strategy. Sometimes she would observe a shop quietly, waiting for a moment when she could slip in and ask for work without drawing negative attention. She discovered that kindness, persistence, and a calm voice could open doors that strength and desperation alone could not. One afternoon, she was helping a tailor mend clothes when she noticed the man who had recently moved next door watching from across the street. He waved, and she waved back shyly. Later that day, he invited her to deliver a small package to his office. She hesitated at first, unsure why he trusted her. But she realized that sometimes trust had to be accepted and decided to go. That one small errand became an opportunity she could not have imagined. Inside his office, she saw a world she had only heard about in stories. Large windows, polished floors, and bookshelves filled with neatly arranged books. Everything seemed impossible, a dream of wealth and comfort so distant from her daily struggles that it almost made her dizzy. He asked simple questions about her life, listened carefully, and seemed genuinely interested. She spoke cautiously, revealing only what she thought was safe. But even this brief encounter changed something inside her. She realized that there were people who saw more than poverty, who could notice courage, determination, and love. Her brother continued school, and this became both a challenge and a source of pride. Other children still noticed his worn clothes, but he began learning quickly and excelling in subjects he loved. The pride she felt in those moments was immense. Every evening, she would ask about his day, listening to his stories about new words, friends, and lessons. And every night, she told him stories, weaving hope into every word, creating a world where anything seemed possible. Summer was harsh, and illness was a constant threat. One day, her brother returned from school with a stomach ache that worsened into a fever. Panic filled her chest, but she remembered lessons learned from the past. She gave him water, tried to keep him cool, and whispered comforting words. She borrowed a little money from the neighbor and brought him to a clinic, praying silently that they would be treated. The doctor helped, giving medicine and advice. And she held him close on the way home, feeling relief and gratitude in equal measure. She continued to work tirelessly. But she also began to notice changes in herself. Her mind was sharper, her hands steadier, and her ability to solve problems improved. She learned how to stretch a coin further than ever. How to make meals that satisfied both hunger and taste with minimal ingredients. She understood the value of observation, of timing, and of subtle negotiation. Survival had made her intelligent, resourceful, and resilient beyond her years. One day she saw her neighbor struggling with paperwork. She offered to help, even though it was not required. He accepted, and in that moment, she realized the importance of small acts of assistance. Her skills, kindness, and dedication became visible in ways she had not expected. People started noticing her not for her poverty, but for her perseverance and ability. It was a quiet shift, almost imperceptible, but significant. Evenings were still moments of reflection. She would sit by the small window, watching the city lights flicker as the sun set. She thought about her brother, their life, and the small victories that had carried them this far. She remembered the winter fever, the moments of despair, and the countless nights of worry. And yet she also remembered the smiles the tiny coins earned, the bread shared, and the kindness offered by strangers. Each memory became a thread in the fabric of hope she was weaving for their future. Her brother's laughter became a source of strength. He began to show curiosity beyond what the school offered, asking questions about the world, about people, and about the life they might one day live. She encouraged him, teaching him the value of persistence, the importance of honesty, and the necessity of kindness even in a harsh world. Each lesson was a gift, a preparation for a life she could only hope would improve. Summer ended, and the city began to cool. Her work continued, but the rhythm had settled. She knew where to go, who to ask, and how to earn just enough to survive. Yet, her thoughts began to drift toward dreams again, not impossible. Childish dreams, but careful plans for a better life. She imagined moving to a safer neighborhood, her brother attending school without shame, and a future where they could rest without constant worry. It was a fragile hope, but it strengthened her spirit. The neighbor remained a quiet presence in their lives. He offered advice, small tasks, and encouragement. He seemed to recognize her potential and the depth of her dedication to her brother. Each interaction became an opportunity for learning, growth, and trust. She began to realize that sometimes help did not come in the form of coins, but in guidance, connections, and belief in someone's character. One evening, as she returned from a long day's work, she found her brother asleep on the small sofa, a book clutched in his tiny hands. She smiled, gently adjusting his blanket. The sight reminded her why she had endured every hardship. Each struggle, each pain, each sleepless night had been for moments like this, quiet, simple, and full of love. She sat beside him, thinking about the past, the present, and the uncertain future. The city was vast, filled with challenges and opportunities alike. She knew that life would continue to test her, but she also knew that their bond was unbreakable. Together, they had survived, learned, and grown stronger. And she sensed deep within that their story was about to change in ways she could never have imagined. The seeds of transformation were already planted, and soon, someone extraordinary would enter their lives, altering the course of their destiny forever. By the time the first leaves of autumn began to fall, the city had changed around them, but their lives remained largely the same. Each morning she rose before the sun, careful not to wake her brother, and made their small breakfast with what little she had. The air had a slight chill, and she wrapped herself in the thin blanket that had become both shield and comfort. Their home still smelled of damp wood and old dust, yet in the quiet moments, it also carried the warmth of their shared resilience. Work became more challenging as the city prepared for the changing season. Shops demanded extra hours for holiday preparations, and labor was more intense. Yet she persevered, knowing that every coin earned meant food, clothing, and sometimes a rare treat for her brother. She learned to balance long hours with the careful attention her brother needed at home. Her body ached constantly, yet her spirit remained unbroken, driven by the unwavering love for the boy who relied on her. Her brother was thriving at school despite the challenges. He had begun making friends, small connections that brought him joy and confidence. Yet she noticed the subtle ways poverty still touched him, the way he hesitated to participate in certain activities, the way his eyes sometimes darted around when wealthier children spoke of trips, new shoes and toys she could not provide. She reminded him daily that true value was not in possessions, but in kindness, learning, and courage. And he believed her because he trusted her completely. One day, she encountered a problem she could not solve with effort alone. A fire broke out in the alley behind their building, and smoke filled their small home. She grabbed her brother, covering his face, and ran into the street. The neighbors helped, some shouting, some offering water and blankets. She watched the flames consume what little was left in the alley, feeling helpless despite her quick action. That night, as her brother slept in her arms, she wept silently, wishing she could shield him from every danger, every hardship. Her neighbor, the man with kind eyes, noticed the fire and approached the next morning. He offered words of comfort and practical help: new blankets, warm food, and even some extra money to repair minor damages. She accepted cautiously, feeling a mix of relief and suspicion, though she had been burned by kindness before, or at least feared the strings it might carry. But his sincerity was evident, and she realized that some people truly wanted to help, not just judge or profit. With his guidance, she began to explore more stable ways of earning a living. He suggested small courses in bookkeeping and simple management skills offered at a local community center. She was hesitant, afraid that her time would be wasted, but he encouraged her, explaining that learning these skills could change her life and provide a better future for her brother. She took a leap of faith and enrolled, balancing work, home, and study. The challenge was immense, but she thrived in the environment where knowledge and persistence met opportunity. Her days became a careful dance of labor, learning, and care. Each morning, she rose before dawn to work, then rushed to classes, then returned to prepare food and homework with her brother. It was exhausting, and sometimes she fell asleep sitting in a chair, her body protesting against the relentless pace. But she discovered that determination could be stronger than fatigue, that love could push someone beyond natural limits. In the midst of this struggle, her brother began to display talents she had never noticed before. He had a knack for numbers, solving problems quickly and with ease. He was curious, asking questions about the world and how things worked. She nurtured this curiosity, buying him books with the little money she could spare, encouraging him to explore his mind. Seeing him grow and develop filled her with a pride she had never experienced, and it fueled her determination to create a better life for both of them. Life was not without moments of fear and despair. Winter approached, and illness returned as a constant threat. She did everything she could to protect her brother, bundling him in layers, keeping their home clean, and monitoring his health closely. Yet she knew that no amount of effort could completely shield them from the harsh realities of poverty. Some nights she lay awake, imagining a world where they were safe, fed, and free from constant worry. It was a dangerous thought, because it reminded her of the fragility of their current existence, but it also gave her hope, a fragile but vital thread to cling to. One evening, after a particularly long day, her neighbor approached with an unusual request. He asked her to help organize a small charity event for children in need. At first she hesitated, unsure if she could manage additional responsibility, but he insisted gently, saying her perspective and experience could make a real difference. She agreed, seeing it as an opportunity to learn, to help, perhaps to connect with others who could one day assist her own family. Working on the event was both exhausting and inspiring. She met people who had influence, resources, and compassion. She observed their methods, listened to their advice, and contributed her knowledge of struggle and survival. She realized that her hardships had given her unique insights that many who had wealth and education could never understand. She began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of leadership and meaningful contribution. As the event concluded successfully, she returned home, exhausted but exhilarated. Her brother ran to meet her, full of excitement about the children they had helped. She hugged him tightly, feeling a mixture of relief, pride, and a renewed sense of purpose. In that embrace, she understood the power of love, perseverance, and opportunity intertwined. Weeks turned into months. Her studies progressed, her skills improved, and she began to earn slightly better wages. The small victories accumulated, and with each step, her confidence grew. She started to envision a life beyond mere survival, a life where her brother could dream without fear. They could live with dignity, comfort, and opportunity. It was still a distant vision, but for the first time, it felt achievable. Her neighbor continued to play a quiet but significant role. He introduced her to people who could offer employment, mentorship, and guidance. His belief in her potential provided both practical support and emotional reassurance. She began to trust that the world could hold more than hardship, that opportunities could exist for those willing to fight for them. The bond between them grew, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Though she remained cautious, aware that trust must always be earned and preserved. By the end of the autumn, she stood at the threshold of a new chapter in their lives. She looked at her brother, who had grown taller, stronger, and wiser beyond his years. She thought of the path they had walked together through sickness, hunger, fear, and hardship, and marveled at their resilience. The fire in the alley, the endless labor, the long nights of worry, and the moments of fleeting joy had all shaped them. And now, she sensed, the next chapter held promise of something far greater, unbeknownst to her. Her efforts had begun to attract attention beyond the neighborhood. People noticed her determination, her intelligence, and her unwavering care for her brother. Small opportunities were appearing in ways she could not yet comprehend, laying the foundation for the extraordinary turn their lives were about to take. And though she did not know it, the moment when everything could change, the moment when a billionaire would step into their lives and rewrite. Their destiny was drawing closer with every passing day. The crisp winter morning felt different that year, though she could not explain why. She rose early as usual, preparing the small breakfast. But her mind carried a sense of anticipation she had not felt before. The city outside was bustling, smoke rising from chimneys, vendors calling out, and children laughing on the streets. Yet there was a quiet expectation in the air, feeling that change was near. Her brother stirred, rubbing his eyes and yawning, still small but growing faster than she realized. She smiled gently, helping him dress in the warm layers she had saved for special occasions. Today, they were heading to the city center for her neighbor's charity event, which had grown in size and reputation. She felt proud of the work she had done in organizing, assisting, and managing small tasks. Her heart swelled as she saw her brother's excitement. He was learning to believe in the beauty of possibility. As they walked through the streets, she noticed people staring, not with judgment or pity, but with curiosity and respect. Her confidence had grown over the months, visible in her upright posture and calm demeanor. She had learned to carry herself with dignity no matter the rags she wore or the hardships she had endured. Each step toward the event felt like a step toward a future she had only dared to imagine in secret. At the charity event, she moved with purpose, coordinating volunteers, arranging supplies, and ensuring that every child received attention and care. She was focused, yet attentive, noticing details others might miss. Her experience living through struggle had sharpened her instincts and compassion. Children came to her naturally, drawn to her warmth and understanding. Her brother followed, learning the art of kindness, organization, and resilience from her example. Amid the crowd, a man arrived whose presence immediately drew attention. Dressed in fine but understated clothing, he carried an aura of calm authority and curiosity. She did not know who he was, but he seemed to observe not only the event, but her work with an intensity that unsettled and intrigued her. He approached, speaking kindly, asking questions about the children, the event, and the challenges she faced. She answered carefully, her voice steady, despite the surprise of the encounter. He listened intently, nodding and occasionally offering suggestions, yet never imposing. His demeanor was calm, patient, and genuine. She found herself speaking openly, sharing both successes and struggles. In him, she sensed understanding without judgment, curiosity without condescension. It was the first time in her life she felt truly seen by someone outside her small circle of survival. The man asked to meet her privately after the event. She agreed cautiously, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. They walked to a quiet area nearby, and he spoke about possibilities she had never considered. He offered resources, opportunities, and guidance that could change the trajectory of their lives entirely. She listened, her mind racing to process the magnitude of what was being offered. Her heart pounded with disbelief and cautious hope. She asked questions, testing his intentions, seeking reassurance. He explained patiently, emphasizing that he saw potential, resilience, and a strength born from adversity. He did not offer charity in the traditional sense. He offered mentorship, education, and the chance to create a life of stability and opportunity. She realized that this was unlike anything she had ever experienced, a door opening not through luck, but through recognition of her courage and dedication. The decision was overwhelming. She thought of her brother, their struggles, and the life they had fought to survive. Could they truly step into a world so different from the streets, the small apartment, the constant hunger and worry? Yet, she understood that this moment was the culmination of years of endurance, learning, and love. To refuse would be to deny the possibility of a brighter future. With cautious hope, she accepted. The man arranged for safe housing, access to education for her brother, and opportunities for herself to continue growing professionally and personally. She felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders, replaced by a mix of excitement, nervousness, and responsibility. She knew that while many challenges would remain, they were stepping into a life where the worst of survival was no longer their daily reality. Over the following weeks, their lives began to transform in ways both subtle and profound. They moved into a small, warm apartment provided by the man, with enough space and comfort to feel safe. Her brother flourished at a new school where his talents were nurtured and celebrated. She began training and learning under guidance that recognized her potential, providing knowledge and skills that would allow her to create stability and success. Yet, the transition was not without difficulty. She struggled to adjust to a life where basic needs were no longer a daily battle. She grappled with guilt, fearing that the ease they now experienced was somehow undeserved. But she reminded herself that this opportunity was a recognition of their resilience, not a handout. She began to understand that accepting help when offered wisely was not weakness, but strength. Her bond with her brother deepened further. No longer solely a protector, she became a guide, mentor, and confidant. Together, they explored new experiences, learned new skills, and dreamed bigger than ever before. The small moments, shared meals, laughter, and quiet reflection became treasures. She realized that love, care, and perseverance had carried them this far, and would continue to guide them into a future filled with possibility. The man who had entered their lives remained a steady presence, offering guidance, encouragement, and support. He observed their growth with quiet satisfaction, providing opportunities for both education and personal development. Through his mentorship, she learned to navigate challenges with skill, to recognize opportunity, and to build a life of stability, dignity, and purpose. She discovered that her past hardships had uniquely prepared her for this journey, giving her empathy, resilience, and wisdom beyond her years. Months passed, and the transformation was evident. Her brother excelled in school, developing confidence, curiosity, and a sense of belonging. She continued to grow, learning skills that allowed her to manage finances, plan for the future, and contribute meaningfully to her community. The life they once imagined, filled with struggle and scarcity, had given way to a reality of hope, growth, and opportunity as she looked back on the years of hardship, the cold nights, the hunger, the long days of labor. She felt a profound sense of gratitude. Each challenge, each moment of fear, each sacrifice had prepared them for this turning point. She realized that love and determination could reshape destiny, and that even the most desperate circumstances could be the foundation for extraordinary transformation. Standing beside her brother, watching him laugh and explore with confidence, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. They had survived, grown, and stepped into a life of possibility. And she knew that their story, once defined by struggle, is now being rewritten by courage, love, and the remarkable intervention of someone who recognized their worth. Together, they were no longer bound by poverty or fear. They were free to dream, to learn, and to embrace a future where their potential could flourish fully. The orphan girl who had once walked the streets with her brother in fear and uncertainty had now become a woman capable of shaping her own destiny and his. The life that once seemed impossible had slowly begun to unfold in ways she had never dared to imagine. The winter had fully arrived, painting the city with frost and creating a quiet stillness in the early mornings. She woke before dawn, not from necessity, but from habit, as the rhythm of her past life had become ingrained. Yet now, there was a difference, a sense of purpose and opportunity rather than mere survival. Her brother had grown taller, his voice stronger, and his confidence more visible with every passing day. He ran ahead on their way to school, waving at friends and neighbors with a brightness that had been absent in his early years. She followed behind, smiling quietly, watching him thrive in a world that once had been so harsh and unwelcoming. The transformation in him was a source of endless pride and comfort. She had begun working under the guidance of the man who had stepped into their lives months before. He provided mentorship, access to education, and opportunities to learn skills that she could never have dreamed of on her own. Her days were filled with learning, planning, small tasks that taught her about responsibility, management, and leadership. Each day, she became more capable, more confident, and more aware of the possibilities that lay before her. Yet she did not forget the path that had led her here. The streets, the hunger, the cold nights, and the countless hours of work remained etched in her memory. They had shaped her, given her resilience, and instilled a sense of empathy that guided her every decision. She understood the value of compassion, patience, and persistence because she had lived through the harshest lessons life could offer. Her brother excelled in school, developing both academically and socially. He asked questions with curiosity, challenged himself in ways that thrilled her, and began to dream of a future where possibilities were limitless. She encouraged him, taught him the importance of integrity, and instilled in him the same values that had guided her through years of struggle. Watching him grow into a young person of confidence and vision became one of her greatest joys. As winter progressed, she and her brother became more involved in the community. They helped organize small events for children in need, shared knowledge, and offered support where possible. She realized that her hardships had given her a unique perspective, one that allowed her to help others navigate difficulties with both understanding and practical advice. The children looked up to her, drawn by the strength, kindness, and determination that had once seemed to be simply survival mechanisms. One day, she received an invitation to attend a small gathering hosted by the man who had become their mentor. It was an informal meeting designed to connect people who could support and inspire each other. She felt nervous at first, unsure of her place in a world she had only recently entered. Yet when she arrived, she was met with warmth and respect. People who valued her experiences, her insights, and her perspective. For the first time, she realized that her past was not something to be ashamed of, but a foundation for her growth and influence. During the gathering, she met individuals who could offer guidance, employment opportunities, and connections. She listened attentively, asking questions, and sharing her experiences in a way that was honest and insightful. Her life of struggle, rather than being a limitation, became a testament to her resilience, intelligence, and dedication. The conversations sparked ideas, opened doors, and made her envision a future filled with potential far beyond what she had ever imagined. Returning home that evening, she reflected on the journey from the cold nights and empty stomachs to the warmth, knowledge, and opportunities now available. She embraced her brother, who had listened to her recount the day's events with wide-eyed excitement. The bond between them had grown stronger, evolving from one of mere survival to a partnership built on trust, love, and shared dreams. Each moment of their present life was a victory over the hardships that had once defined them. She continued to work diligently, balancing learning, mentorship, and responsibilities at home. Each day presented challenges, but she faced them with a sense of capability that had been forged through years of perseverance. The small apartment they now called home was filled with warmth, laughter, and a sense of stability that was once unimaginable. The past was never forgotten, but it no longer dictated their lives. Instead, it informed her decisions, guided her actions, and strengthened her resolve. Her brother's talents continued to flourish. He showed an aptitude for problem-solving, a curiosity about the world, and a sensitivity to others' needs. She nurtured these qualities, encouraging him to explore, learn, and develop confidence. Together, they engaged in conversations about future plans, dreams, and possibilities, imagining a life where challenges were met with preparation, knowledge, and courage rather than fear and uncertainty. The mentor remained a steady presence, offering advice, opportunities, and encouragement. He helped her navigate complex situations, introduced her to individuals who could provide guidance, and supported her personal and professional growth. Through his mentorship, she began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of making meaningful contributions, leading initiatives, and creating stability for herself and her brother. Over the months, she began to consider ways to help others facing similar challenges. She recognized the importance of education, mentorship, and community support, and sought to create opportunities for children and young adults who struggled as she and her brother once had. Her empathy, intelligence, and resourcefulness allowed her to design programs that were practical, impactful, and sustainable. She realized that her journey of hardship had equipped her uniquely to guide and inspire others. As the first snow fell, she and her brother stood by the window, watching the city transform. She thought of the years of struggle, the sleepless nights, the hunger, and the constant fear. Yet she also thought of the small victories, the moments of joy, the support from unexpected sources. Empire. Each experience had led to this moment, a life filled with hope, opportunity, and purpose. She understood that destiny was not merely a matter of luck or chance, but a combination of resilience, love, determination, and the willingness to accept guidance when offered. The billionaire who had entered their lives was a catalyst. But it was her courage, perseverance, and unwavering dedication that had made this transformation possible. The recognition she received, the opportunities she embraced, and the growth she achieved were all products of a life lived fully. Even amidst struggle, the orphan girl who had once walked the streets with her brother, fearful and uncertain, had become a young woman capable of shaping her own destiny. Her life was a testament to the power of love, resilience, and opportunity. She had learned that the harshest trials could be transformed into strength, and that the bonds of family and trust could guide one through even the most daunting circumstances. Standing beside her brother, watching him explore, learn, and grow with confidence, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Together, they had navigated adversity, embraced opportunity, and stepped into a future filled with hope and promise. The journey had been long, the challenges formidable, but their love, determination, and courage had prevailed. And in that moment, she knew that their story, once defined by poverty and fear, had been rewritten into one of resilience, opportunity, and the extraordinary power of human spirit.